Entrepreneur, and today I'm having a little bit of fun building some sort of a sprite editor, like a very simple 8-bit style canvas-based tool that allows us to specify the size of the canvas that we want to work with. It allows us to paint in different colors, and it also allows us to save those to a file. Okay, and this is actually, you're going to be surprised how fast we can build this through the power of p5js. If you never work with p5js, then you never use YouTube to teach yourself JavaScript, so welcome. And p5js is pretty awesome, so we're going to be working with that because it honestly, it abstracts away a lot of stuff that we don't care about. So we're going to get started very rapidly. Okay. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to open the terminal. I assume you have npm. If you do not have npm, you can type in node install and you can install Nodejs so that you have npm. The reason why we're going to use npm is so that we can do a bunch of fancy stuff. So I'm going to navigate to a folder that I want to be using. I'm going to make a directory, so I create a new, I can start fresh, mkdir, let's call it canvas map, or I guess 8-bit canvas, and then I'm gonna cd into it, and then I'm just gonna open Atom and open a file in there. Basically open this empty folder, and I'll create a new file, Command N to create a new file, and I'll just save it as index.html. Boom. This is almost the end of our setup. The other thing I did was I searched for downloads in p5js. And if you look here, you can find CDN. So that means that this is the URL of the CDN. I'm going to Command L to copy, Command C to copy. And then I'll do script src equals blah, blah, blah. I'll just copy in this URL so that we can import P5. And then we're going to open a new script tag so that we can get to work. Okay? Basically, we install p5js locally. The other thing I'm going to do, the reason why I want to use Node.js, you don't have to. You can just open your file with Finder. That's fine. I don't mind. But I just thought it would be more interesting to do it this way. Because what we can do, as soon as we're inside of our page, is we can call npx serve, npx being a package, a way to use packages without installing them. And that way we can literally serve immediately. And then I can copy the URL, and what you'll see is that I'm serving the page for a server. This is very helpful because instead of using the file protocol, which sometimes doesn't even work, so let me show you. Sometimes you can't even open the page, and opening with files sometimes is annoying and creates other problems. We can open via server, as I just showed you. This is one of the many stuff that I cover in my JavaScript courses. If you're interested in learning more with me, I'm setting up some sort of a very, very inexpensive subscription, something like $7 a week, where every day I send you a 30 minutes video, probably less, like let's say 20-minute video to get you to code and stuff. So if you're interested in that, or you think it's cool, or you have thoughts about it, just let me know in the comments. That said, let's get ahead and build some cool stuff. So we got nothing. First thing that I want to mention related to p5js is that as soon as you look around, so let's say I just click Get Started, you'll see that there's two functions that are very important. One is called Setup and the other is called Draw. So I'm just going to copy this code and I'm going to paste it in so that I can give you that authentic experience. For some reason I'm not getting syntax highlighting. I'm just going to try and restart the thingy. Alright, so now we have syntax highlighting. So I'll just refresh the page here at localhost 5000, and I'll open the console via pressing Command-Option-I, and we see this ellipse. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a console.log here, and I'll just console.log the name of the method, and I'll copy it and paste it on setup as well. I just want to see a couple of things, and as you can see, setup is called once and then draw is called a ton of times. Okay, every animation frame draw is called. This is because this tool is meant to allow you to build more complicated stuff. And if you don't want that to happen, you can call a thing called noLoop. If you search for it, you'll find it, but basically it's just noLoop. Boom. And if you do that and I refresh, you'll see that my setup and my draw are called all in once. For now, we're going to do this. And what I like to do is I want to show you, I guess, the way an experienced person will look at building the 8-bit canvas thingy. Because I feel like it's going to give you a great set of insights. So let's assume we want to know what the map looks like at every step of the way. So what we can visualize is that a map or a grid, I guess, or a canvas, or let's just call it a grid, is equal to a list, an array basically, that contains other arrays. And so if we imagine a 3x3 list, we will have 3 objects. We will have basically 3 arrays containing one array, and then we will have 3 objects per array. Why would we do that? Let me finish up this. Okay, and each array could have, for example, the colors. Let's just say color 1, and then you could have color whatever, color 2, color 3, right? So if we were to have something like this, we will be specifying each element, so const element will be equal to grid square bracket x square bracket y, where x and y will be from 0 to 2 for both, right? So this will be a great starting point to define the grid. So let's imagine we add this grid. Let's just roll with it, okay? Just gonna roll with it. So what we could have in our draw, and I'm gonna go back to the reference because I want to know how to draw a square. And you will see that it's very simple. I'll go to reference, I'll just Command F for square, and there we go. How do you draw a square? You draw a square, location 3020, with size of 55. So we just specify the size by typing in that number. For now, we're not going to concern ourselves with that. We're just going to draw a bunch of squares. So what I can do is I can just literally, I have this variable grid defined here. Let's say literally we're going to have two, well, let's do 10, 20, let's do 50, 40, 50, 80, 150, 200, 255. And these are going to be shades of gray as we're going to see in a second. But let's just do this just to keep it simple. And then in our draw function, I'm going to call grid.forEach, right? Grid.forEach meaning that for each of the grids, I'm going to do something. And I'm going to call a function that will receive the current row. So this is one row, this is one row, this is one row. Okay, so I'm going to type row, and I'm going to do this. And if you never saw this, imagine that typing function draw row is literally equal as saying const draw equals row, boom. These two things mean the same thing. This one is using the function declaration. This one is declaring a function as an arrow function. They literally mean the same thing. To me, it looks better. And I want you to just get used to it. But at the end of the day, the big logic we're doing is we're calling a forEach on the grid, on this variable. And this variable grid, on a basic level, has three elements, because you have one row, two row, third row. So this will be 0, 1, and 2. And then for each of those rows, we're going to call another forEach, and we're going to call it element, because we're selecting now the column, so we're now selecting the element. And we're going to do something. What are we going to do? We're going to draw square, right? We're going to do square. The position is going to be equal to, I guess, some sort of counter. And the same goes for the height. So due to that fact, I'm going to change this to have parentheses, row, and then x, and then element, comma, y, and I'll get to it in a second. But basically, we're going to go and have x star, let's say, square width, or I guess width, or I guess size, because it's going to be a rectangle, so just do size. And then the last element will be the width, which is going to be size. Okay, we're going to cover this in a second. So what we have to ask ourselves is what does size mean right now? For now, I guess we're going to say that our canvas, const canvas size is going to be equal to 300. Then we're going to have a const So if our canvas size is going to be 300, then our const size is going to be equal to 300 divided how many elements we have, so grid.length. And then we're going to be able to do a grid.forEach and a row.forEach. I'm going to be reiterating over all of I did, but it's funny because to me this is like a joke. It may be very complicated for you. I'm going to be repeating myself, but I just want to see if it compiles, because that's something that even as an experienced developer, you actually have to figure it out. You want to see what happens. So let's just see what happens. X is not defined. And then we get 1 square. Okay, so x is not defined. This is the line, so we're going to remove this line because it's useless. And we're going to see what we get. We still get this. So what does it all mean? When I don't know what's going on, I just do a console.log. So I'm going to console.log draw.forEach, row.forEach. So this is draw, grid.forEach, row.forEach, and then I want to see what x is. And then I'm going to see what y is. And as you can see, I console.log the name of the variable, the name of the method, and all that stuff so that I can see what's going on. Boom. Okay? And then I got to ask myself, what is size divided by grid.length? Console.log size. So let's do draw size, comma size. And size is 100. Zero times size. Okay, so I'm thinking this needs to be increased by 1, and the same goes for y, because otherwise you have 0 times size. And now we don't see anything. That's interesting. That's most likely because the element is going away from the canvas. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a canvas. How do I do that? I just search for it. As you can see, I type in canvas, I see create canvas, and canvas will set the size, and the size that we want is 300. So I'm going to do const, or actually, yeah, just do const canvas equals create canvas with canvas size, because it's going to be a square. Okay? And then I just refresh. Now, as you can see, we still have our canvas. It looks like it's all offset. So what I'm going to change is I'm going to remove the +1. This was wrong. Boom. Okay, now we're seeing a grid, we're seeing a bunch of boxes, right? So why does it work and what's going on? Okay, this is the variable grid, right? And by the way, how do we do the fill? Let me just do the fill very quickly. We just search for fill, and then you type in fill. Before you do the square, you type in fill with the value of the element. So the current element is here. I'm just going to type element.color. Boom, boom, and boom. And as you can see, we get different colors because we set different variables here. And we're gonna do it even more complicated later. But the overarching theme that I want to cover now is that by looking at the end, by looking at what we want, which is the ability of knowing what the grid looks like at all times, we can also define a render method that works with it. And in that way, we know exactly where we want to be. Okay, and the other thing I want you to notice is that by using this forEach, we wrote extremely powerful code that's quote-unquote scales, because if I duplicate this line, for example, let's say I duplicate this line and duplicate it here, and then maybe I'm going to have to add an additional element, to be honest. I'm just going to add a random one from here. And then I'll do the same thing for the other two. Or the other three rather. If I create a 4x4 grid just by copying and pasting, this code will scale to work with it. Okay, so that means that if we create these colors via randomization, we're going to be able to do some very cool stuff. And as you can see, it's very powerful from the get-go. So what did we actually do? Let's just try and recap. And if you're suffering a little bit because you're not understanding it, that's good. That means that you're learning, so that's good. Realize that what we're doing here is we're leveraging functional programming to do a lot of stuff in very little amounts of code. So we're calling grid.forEach. What does it mean? We take the grid, for each element, for each row, we do something. Each row is basically this. Let's say this is the row, the current row. Each row is a list of elements, so we call for each again, and we get the single element. So we're going to get color 1, right? And why do we get x and y? Well, first of all, because we can, because the second parameter of the for each, or rather the second parameter of the function given to the for each will be the counter, just the counter. This is basically a counter. I'm using x because it makes sense, but you could call it row number. It will make the same sense. It just would take longer to write it. And then we do a couple of things. We set the fill to the current element color, so the current color, and then we also draw a square that has this specific position and then has the specific size, right? So if they're all square, the first square will be in position 0, 0, because it's 0 times size, where size is equal to canvas size divided by grid.length, because we're working with a square. We're working with a square grid, so we assume that the length is equal to the length of a row. We don't need to inspect the row. We just make that assumption, and then we just iterate. Okay? So let's get it a step forward by allowing us, given any random number, any specific integer number, to have that grid have those numbers. Okay? So what I'm going to do is, instead of having this hard-coded grid, I'm just going to create a function called, I'm just going to type it as a function. Function, I guess random, but what I'll show you is that random already exists, because it's a common pitfall. Random already exists, and given a specific integer, it will give you a random floating point number. Takes either 0, 1, if no argument is given. If one of the arguments is given, it's an random return a number from 0 to the number. Okay? So basically, it's going to give us a random number from 0 to whatever. So that's the number we're going to actually be using. So there's no reason to generate this. But let's create a function that generates one of these, and we're going to use RGB. The reason why we're going to use RGB is because we're going to look for this fill function. And fill can contain 3 variables. So we're going to do this. Okay? So let's call function create, or guess random block. It's just going to return an object, so basically an object like this, that instead is going to have an R, a G, and a B property name, and the property R is going to have random 255, and the same for the other 2. Okay? And we're going to return this object. So now this is how we generate one random block. How do we generate the entire canvas? Let's create another function. Function generate grid, boom, boom. Then we're going to receive a parameter called size, and then given the size, we're gonna generate it. So how do we do that? We simply take a variable, let's say let grid, or let's just call it something else. Actually, I'm just gonna delete this so I don't confuse you. Let's call it old grid, so you see that. But I'm gonna declare a local variable called grid that we're going to use here. You could technically call it const, but I like to call it grid with let, because we're going to change it, and it's going to be equal to an empty array. Then we're going to generate a function, we're going to loop for let. Let me tell you what we're going to do, and then we're going to do it. We're going to create a row, and we're going to put it inside the grid, and then once the whole grid is complete, we're going to return it. Okay? So at the end of the method, we're going to return grid. Then what are we going to do here on line 22? We're going to loop for let x equals 0, x less than size, x plus plus. So we're going to go over the axes. And we're going to generate a row. So let row equals empty array. And then for let y equals 0, y less than size, y plus plus. So we're just going to do the y. We're going to create those elements. So what we're going to do, row.push of generate random block. So random block. Okay, so we're gonna call random block. We're gonna get one random of these, and we're gonna just put it inside of the row, and then at the end of the iteration for the row, we're gonna grid dot push row. We're gonna push a row inside of the grid. Okay, so basically this function will be called, for now we're gonna call it on setup. So let's do that. And instead of having old grid, let's declare a variable let grid equals an empty array, okay? So that we can use it here because it's a global variable. And then we're gonna say that grid will be equal to the result of this function. So on line 40, I'm gonna say grid is equal to generate grid of size, let's say 2 for now, just an example. And now I can delete this, by the way. Let's see what we get. I'm gonna refresh. We get an exception because apparently arguments is not a valid color representation. Okay, so apparently we got some weird number going on. Most likely what we need to do is just turn it into an integer. So what we're gonna do is parse int of random 255. Or we could do, let's just do this for now. Parse int. Arguments is not a valid color representation. So at this time, I don't know what's going on. So how do we figure it out? Wait. That's what's going on. We still have element.color here. As you saw, we now have element.r.g.b. So instead of using element.color, we're going to have to use element.r, element.g, and element.b. And that's how we do the fill. And as you can see, it works. So I'm gonna repeat what I did so that you get it. And as you can see, I have a habit of closing the functions. It's not because I hate you, I don't want you to copy them. It's because otherwise I'm gonna be distracting myself. And you can always go back in the video to look at the code, or you can look at the code at the bottom. If I forgot to put the code, just text me, I'll send you the code. It's not a big deal. But what's the point? We generate a random block, which is just an object that has integer variables with key of RGB because we match how we're going to fill. So that's what we do. And then generate grid, just given a size, given a number, just creates a bidimensional array with that size. It's just a matrix that basically represents this grid. So if you want to change from 2 to anything else, we can go in the setup and we can do, let's say we want 255 by 255. It's going to take a little bit because it's a lot. And as you can see, we eventually get it. For some reason, it's black. I'm not sure why. Probably because it's too big. Let's do 25. Boom. Okay. And we can do 12. I honestly don't remember what the right number would be for probably 16. If you do 16, that would be a 16-bit grid. And if you did 8, that would be an 8-bit grid. And funnily enough, for us to save this is actually extremely simple. We're just going to search for it. And I think if you type save in p5, yeah, save a specific canvas with a file name. So I'm pretty sure that that's the example. Save canvas as an image. Boom. So we can literally do, on setup, we can create a new button. So we're going to create the new button. Const save button equals, we'll figure that out. But then what we're going to do is save button dot, let's say on click for now, even though I know it's not it. We're going to save the canvas to your 8-bit image. Okay, and let's figure out how to create a button. We just search here, create button. That sounds like a very simple name. And create button receives a parameter of its text. So let's say save image, or I guess download image. And then on mouse pressed, so I'm looking here, dot mouse pressed, that's basically the function that gets called when you click on the button, and then you can feed it another function, just like in this example, so that that function will run. So what I'm gonna do is the mouse pressed, and I'm gonna feed it a function like this, because if you do save blah blah blah, it's gonna run automatically. So I'll show you. If you do this, this code will run automatically the second the code loads. So it's not gonna work. It's gonna load and download immediately, and the button doesn't work, as you can see. Instead, what you can do is you can feed it a function. So you will normally you will type function blah 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 curly brace like this. You will type something like this. So you will feed it a function, and this will work, by the way. So you would just type function open parentheses close parentheses curly braces, then save, and then curly, and then round. And as you can see, this works. But since I'm, I guess, experienced, I'm just going to write an arrow function like this, and it literally does the same thing. So it just looks cooler, and it gets you used to this. Okay. So as we said, if I refresh, the download works, and you get literally the random picture that you generate. So at each stage, you generate a random picture, and you can now download it. Okay. So the next thing we need to do is we need to figure out a way to select one of these boxes and change the color, right? So how do we do that? Well, we need to definitely look into the onClick function, and we most likely need to look at the onClick that would be triggered when you click inside of the canvas. Okay, so what I'm going to search for here is click. And as you can see, there's a bunch of them. And mouse clicked here can be both used for method in p5 and method in p5.element. Let's just do this one in the for the element. So what we can do is we can attach, just like we did here on the mouse pressed, we can attach mouse clicked, which, by the way, what is the difference? Once the button is pressed and released versus once it's only pressed. So I guess we're going to do mouse pressed. Now let's do mouse clicked for now. We're going to do mouse clicked, which is a little different from mouse press, as you saw, because mouse press will be executed the second you press, while mouse click will be executed the second you press and then you release. Okay, so we have our canvas here on line 30. I'm going to type canvas.mouseClicked, and we're going to do something. So let's call it change tile color, right? Yeah, so the second you click on it, we're going to call this function change tile color, which I'm going to define. I'm actually going to define it up here. Yeah, let's define it up here so we can separate all the stuff. Function generate tile color, and we know we receive an event, or at least I know, so I'll let you know. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a console.log with the name of the method, then the parameter event, and then the value of event, so that we can see that. Okay. So then I press Command Option I to open up the console. I'm going to refresh the page, and then I'm going to click on the canvas. And as you can see, I get something. Let's open this up. We see a bunch of stuff. And long story short, these are all very important and useful things. But the most important elements that we're going to use are two elements, layer X and layer Y. And the reason why is because I can literally show you how I thought about it so that you can do that too for yourself. So what I did was I know that the body has 8 pixels of margin automatically. So I look at these numbers here, and I look at screen X 236, and then I look at layer X 228, which is literally 8 less. So I know for a fact, or at least I have a feeling, that the layer X is telling me the position of click inside of the element, which is exactly what I need. And then I remove the margin of the body by changing the CSS. I can Command K to clear the console. I can click again, and now I should see that screen X is free and that layer X is free as well. So that leads me to believe that layer X and layer Y are the position when I clicked, and then the two element is the element, the HTML element. So knowing this allows us to only focus on these 3 variables. So I'm literally just going to copy them. Layer X, layer Y. Why? Because when you click, as of now, you can click the canvas, the entire thingy, but we don't know which tile you clicked. Okay? So we don't want to generate a bunch of classes for each class. That would be an approach. You could literally, maybe if we were building this in React or something else, we would be having a separate tile being an element. But we don't need to do that. We can just have this representation of the grid, and then we can have you feel as if you're interacting with the tile, but you're actually only interacting with the grid, and then we figure out which grid you clicked, and then we change the underlying data structure, which I think is pretty cool. So how do we do that? Well, we need to know the canvas size. Let me leave the variables at the top of the file. So canvas size will never change, while grid does change, so that's why I'm changing that. And then we're working on this function called change tile color, right? And so let's declare these variables, layer x. So the way you declare these variables, by the way, is this, and I'll show you why. But basically, this is equivalent to say const layer x equals event dot layer x, and doing the same thing for layer y as well. But instead of doing this, we can literally just declare it like this, because it's literally as if you took this piece, you cut it out, and then you pasted it here. Okay, that's how I visualize it. And basically, it allows me to declare that variable in one line. And I'm also going to console.log it, because most likely we will need some help in running the math. So I want you to also give it this good habit. And the way, again, I do console.log is the name of the method, the name of the variable, comma, the space, and then the name of the value of the variable. And then I can press Command-Shift-D to duplicate the line, so we can have both. Okay, so let's just do that so we see these variables. As you can see, this is the stuff we care about. So how do we figure out which element we clicked? I'm gonna change the grid size to 3 by 3 so that it's easy to make an example. Okay, and so we know that the size is 300 and the height is 300 as well. So that means that this grid element, this one, which we called tile, this tile is 100 by 100. This tile is 100 by 100, this tile is 100 by 100, okay? So if you click here on 4236, you're supposed to be here. If you click here, 16160, you're supposed to be here, right? So how do we translate this into code? Let's try and figure that out. Well, first of all, we need to know the tile size. So const the tile size is going to be equal to canvas size divided by grid.length, which is something we already did here, size. Okay, I think tile size is a better variable name, so I'm actually going to rename it to tile size. I feel like it's a better way of showing it. And then we're going to do the same thing here, and I'm going to console.log it again so that we can see what happens in real time. Then, given the tile size, we just need to figure out which x and which y we clicked. So let's declare a variable const x. What is that going to be equal to? We know the tile size. We know where we clicked. So we're going to divide layer x by tile size. And let's see what we get. And as I said, I want to put the name of the method before so that it's clear to know what we're printing out. I'm going to refresh, click on it, and as you can see, I get 0.47, which is less than 1. And then I get 1.4, which is more than 1 but less than 2. And then I get 2.51, which is less than 3 but more than 2. So what I can do is I can use math.floor to always get the lowest integer. Okay, so let's see what happens with math.floor. So you can see I get 0, I get 1, and I get 2. Okay, so that's how I get my x tile. So now I'm just gonna do the same thing for y. Const y equals math.floor of layer y slash tile size. And now I have the variable, so now I know which one I need to interact with. So I can do grid square bracket x square bracket y is going to be equal to, let's say, a new random element. So I'm just going to do a random block. It's going to be equal to random block. So that means that the second I click on a tile, I'm going to change one of those. And since I have no loop, I also need to redraw. So what you're gonna see is that nothing happens for now. Actually, this stuff explodes. Tile size is not defined. Let me see where the mistake is. Title size. Okay, I mistyped title size. Okay. And now I'm just calling this. And what you're gonna see though, even without that exception, is that we still get nothing. And the reason why is because we're not redrawing. So the way you redraw is you literally type redraw. Boom. That's as simple as it gets. Refresh. And as you can see now we get random colors. Okay? And we can still download this. So let me know if you liked what we did. If you liked it, I'm going to show you also how to create buttons that allow you to change the color. And I'm going to show you how to create a way for you to drag instead of just clicking and releasing to changing the color of the tiles. And also show you how to have a slider for changing that. That said, let me also know what you think about doing some sort of tidbits every day, like 20 minutes of teaching every single day. I feel like this is the start of the year, so it will be a great thing to commit to. I feel like 20 minutes is probably the maximum amount of video length that a person can consume in terms of educational content if it's administrated daily. And I'm thinking of pricing it at $7, $7 a week. And I think we're also gonna do a free video call every week as a bonus call, so that you have a reason to subscribe, not only for the video, but also to be part of a community. Let me know what you think of that. That's something that has been in my head. I feel like I think like it would be awesome. I just don't know if it will be successful and if people will actually want it. So let me know what you think. And again, let me know if you like this tutorial. That said, I will advise with having you give it a shot first by yourself on using p5js. This is an incredible library. If I were to build anything on vanilla JS, I would just use p5js. It's so good. And I'm like a veteran developer, and this has been built for designers. I think this has been built very smartly. This is exactly how I would want my library to work. So I would highly recommend you checking that out. That said, I'm Alex the Entrepreneur, or Alex the Entrepreneur now. Thank you very much for watching this. Have an amazing day.